Hey guys, welcome back to our restoration project. So today we're going to go over some things to get our case prepared and ready for assembly, mounted back on the stand, and in a real clean state after we receive it back from the machine shop. Also, we're going to take a look at some of the work that Ollie's did to the case to get it ready for us, and also some of the things that they didn't do, and we'll talk about those, why they did and why they didn't do those things. So it's real important to watch that. Also, some of the things we're doing today here, it's important to know this is an aluminum case. One of the polishing things we're going to go over only applies to aluminum cases. It does not apply to magnesium cases, so FYI there. Anyhow, let's take a look at a couple of clips, what I did to get this thing ready, and then when we come back, we'll put some studs in here and take a look at that machine work. Okay, and just a quickie look here to see how we're tuning up the outside of the case. So I'm just taking a Dremel with some fine assorted wire brushes, and these are available in our store if you want to do something like this. But basically what we're doing here is just bringing it back to more of a fresh cast or freshly milled look right after a media tumble, and it does a pretty good job, although it takes a little while to do it. Here's our freshly media tumbled surface. Nice matte finish, but you still have some residual staining in there where the media can't quite get down in that grain and get it out. So something like this would be helpful for that. And then going in for a little bit closer look, you can see some of that staining down in the grain there. So wire brush really is a good way to get that out. Our fins don't look too bad here, but they look a little bit better tuned up with a wire brush. And then let's see if we can get a close-up of some of this oxidation and see how we can get that out. Okay, and then I take a fine, stiff wire brush, and I just go one direction to just kind of even out any swirl marks or any irregularity in the Dremel pattern, and that seems to bring it up pretty nice. And then once we got everything blown off, we want to flip it over and we want to look at our mating surfaces and run a bare hand, no gloves, over all the surfaces and make sure there's no burrs or any kind of sharp edges on there that need to be addressed. If so, we need to do it at this time. We're going to take a hard block with some 600 and just lightly skim, and it's going to be flatter than flat. We don't want to roll our sandpaper. We don't want to use sandpaper by hand. We have to use a block, and just make sure our mating surfaces are good before we go into wash. Okay, so I'm using a DuraBlock with an aluminum hard backer, 600 grit, nice and tight on my block. And just slowly pulling. Okay, that feels pretty good. She's ready for wash. Okay, so we're moving on to our final step here. So what we want to do is we want to move quickly through each step. We want to be thorough, but we want to move quickly. We don't want any standing water on this for too long. I'm using hot, soapy water. The soap is a mild car washing soap with a car washing brush, a brand new one. No residues or oils on that. So we're going to start with the inside first. Wash it up, flip it over, scrub the backside, rinse it, and then blow dry it with compressed air. Once we have it dry, we're going to move it over to this area here to dry outside for a couple of hours on a nice warm day, and then we're ready for the next half. Okay, and then mounting things up to our engine stand here. So we got our right half case mounted, and I'm just starting to go through some studs here, remounting of our studs. We've got our left half up here on the bench and working through the studs there. Let's take a look and see how we did the studs and how we get back without getting lost. All right, so what I did before I disassembled and pulled all the studs is I took some very detailed photographs up close, and I just wrote down which side was which and all the locations of our studs, left and right side, and then I put down all the critical measurements in all the different locations, so I know when I put things back, we'll be back where we're supposed to be. And then reconditioning our studs, basically what I did is I pulled all them out, soaked them in a mild derusting solution, and then rinsed them and dried, flash dried them, and then lightly brushed them on a wire wheel on a grinder. The whole trick to this is not to get too aggressive with your wire brushing. We're just basically taking the any kind of residue off of there, brings you back up to a shine. We're not really getting into it with the wire brush. We just want to be real light with that. Here's our head studs here and some of our rocker studs. And then for our case, I like paper plates. I just label them left and right. And then once we have them blued, I oil them and just let them kind of set there, keeping them segregated through the whole working process and getting them back mounted to the case. Okay, let's look at a couple of up-close details on these studs that can keep us out of trouble and something to be mindful of as we're putting our studs back in our case. And I have found this to be the case in all cases, from our heads to our cam towers to our case halves, with the exception of these two studs right here. So if we look at the tops of these studs, these are flat on top. We also have long threads here and shorter threads going down inside the case there. That's why we've got to be really careful of our measurements before we take things apart. Okay, an up-close look here at a typical stud we pull out of our case. So the top side of our stud is going to have a rounded head. You can see the finish is dome shape. The bottom side, in all cases, is going to be flat. Okay, that's not necessarily the case if you buy a new stud. It's usually flat or machined on both ends, but a factory stud will be rounded on one end, flat on the other. And also, you're going to have offsets. Okay, so this is shorter threads here than we are here. That's why you need to really keep track of everything and be good with your measurements, keep us out of trouble. Another thing to consider is going to be threads that are damaged or are studs that are bent. In this case, I've had several of the oil sump cover studs, real small ones here, have actually just really been abused. So I pulled all those out and I wasn't able to get replacement studs. And actually right now it's very difficult to get anything to rebuild these cars. But so what I'm doing in this case, I'm actually making my own studs. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking a stud and I'm cutting these ones a little bit longer than our factory studs. And the reason that is for the nylock versus a standard nut. Okay, so you can see close up here, the nylock is much taller. One of the problems I have with Porsche and their studs, and let's get one here to look at, is typically they run their studs so close to the top of the nut. Looks like that. When everything's torqued down, that's pretty much what you got there. That's really not the best way to have it. Things can loosen up and end up with a lot of leaks and a lot of other problems. Really, it's best to run your threads through to some degree, like that. That really is the best way, but that's not how Porsche did it. So with our factory studs, we pretty much just have to live with those. Any replacement studs, we could probably make an adjustment if we get the right part. So what I've done with my oil sump cover studs is I've made them a little bit longer. Okay, so here's my finished part right here. I finished off the head smooth so that when we put our nylock on there, we make up for the extra distance. We can bring that down in there and we get a real good tight torque on that. If we're flush with our plastic on our nylock, that thing can work loose over time, and the sump is really where you get a lot of leaks from. So that's why I've made custom longer ones. You can make those by just getting something like a
What I'm using here is just a button head. Just cutting the end off, grinding the end, and running them in. Okay, let me run the rest of these studs in here, and then we'll have a close-up look and see what Ollie's did at the machine shop. Okay, we got a rounded head on top there, flat on the bottom. That one's going to drop down inside. Okay, that's our measurement. I'm not really driving them down in there. I'm not trying to bottom anything out. They're just lightly oiled and running them in. And then I'm running my sump studs in about 15 millimeters. That should give us enough room for our assembly, a nice washer, and a nylock. There's a little bit left over. And then if we need to, we can fine tune those later. And then one last look here just to see how we did with all our studs in place. We're all shined up. Also, it's important to note, guys, the finish that we did here with our wire brush technique, this is only for cast aluminum. It is not for magnesium cases. Also, if you choose to do something like this, we have to stay away from any flat milled surfaces, anything, any kind of mating surface. Got to stay away from that. It's just cosmetic only. If you have a magnesium case and you want to tune it up, probably the best way to get there is a vapor blasting, maybe a combination with media tumble. Probably the best you're going to be able to get there, but no wire brush on magnesium. And then taking a look at our service tag here from Ollie's. So basically what happens, you bring your case to Ollie's or send it in. And what they do is they do a detailed analysis before they recommend any kind of milling procedures at all. So they're going to look your case over, measure everything, put straight edges on it, and make sure it's straight, flat, and true. They're going to check out all your ports. They're going to check out all your threaded, studded areas, and make a recommendation based on that. For us, we have really caught a break here. This case actually in really, really good shape. And they have better luck with the aluminum cases. So if you got an aluminum case, you're probably going to catch a break, same as us. So what they've done, according to our service tag here, they do a media tumble. So first thing they do is they hot tank this several times and get all the gunk out of it, degrease it, basically clean it up, get all the silicone, all the gunk out of it, and then it's ready for a media tumble. They put it in a ceramic media tumbler for a while, and that's what brings us up to the finish, how we received it. From that point then, you're basically going to move on to some machine work. We managed to escape any kind of milling of our flat surfaces here. They didn't need to take anything off of that. Usually what they would do is they would mill this surface. Let's say you had a slightly tweaked or slightly warped case. They would mill this down on both halves. They'd put it back together, and they would run a big long drill bit right down here and rebore this out. And that would change things considerably as far as bearings and things like that. So we caught a break. We can go back to standard, everything there. The other thing they did, they removed and replaced all our galley plugs. They did the oil bypass modification. If we can take a look down in there, see some of the drill work. So they're down in there doing some things. And then also, I recommend for this oil bypass modification, I'm going to put a link below because we're just kind of running out of time on this video. And Kurt can do a much better job explaining this. He has a video on this modification, why it needs to be done, and what happens with it. Also, on his website, he has real nice diagrams. It's very easily explained as to what it is and what happens. And then the last thing we had Ollie's do for us was add some piston squirters. What that does, it basically lubricates the inside of the piston. As it's traveling up and down, you're going to get a little extra oil coverage. You roll this guy over here, you can see these piston squirters down in there. This is something they add, and that's going to shoot oil up underneath your piston. Just help to lubricate everything, keep everything a little bit cooler. And then I guess lastly, one other thing they can do is they can deck the surface here to make sure everything is flat and milled properly. We managed to escape that. We're actually in really good shape there. So we get to go with a standard shim under there. If they do mill this off, you're going to have to add extra copper into there under your barrels to make up for that. Okay guys, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.